Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Meditation and Spiritual Practice. Um, nice to see everybody. I want to share what I think is a incredibly powerful and challenging teaching um, that is kind of brought out by our Hasidic masters. And what we're going to share this morning is from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, 19th century spiritual master. Um, but it goes much, he really is quoting something from the Talmud, which is much earlier. And he says, he takes this interpretation of the first line of the Ve'ahavta prayer, the Shema, the Ve'ahavta, that many of us are familiar with, which is Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you should love God with b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, u'b'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, and u'b'chol meodecha, which that meodecha is with all your might. It's not really might. Some of it gets in translated as your stuff or your resources. But what Levi Yitzchak does is he translates it as me'od, as midah, or measure. And he says that you must calmly and joyfully accept all that God measures out to you. As our rabbis taught, loving God with all your might, meodecha, means that whatever measure, midah, he meets out to you, moded, thank God, modeh, greatly, meod, and say that all that the merciful one does is for the good. You should firmly believe that there is a great good in something that even seems to be evil, for evil cannot originate from the divine. This seems to be evil, for evil cannot originate from the divine. This was the matter of Nahum Ish Gamzu, who, because of his great faith in God, accepted everything that happened as a manifestation of the goodness of the divine will. That's why the Talmud calls him Nahum Ish Gamzu, the man of Gamzu. This too, Gamzu means this too is for the good, or Gamzu letova. This is all for the good. In this way, he sweetened the judgment and transformed the harsh decree into mercy, changed the evil into good. This attitude is reflected in the verse, who brought you water out of the flint rock from Deuteronomy, which embodies the mystery of raising holy sparks to the divine source. Water symbolizes God's goodness and mercy, while the rock symbolizes his power and might, and hence judgment. Your pure, firm thoughts can change God's attitude of judgment into the attribute of mercy when you believe that all God does is for the good, and you express your great and mighty love for the Holy One. There's a little bit more teaching, which we'll get to in a moment, but just to push down to be able to encounter all of life and say that everything is for the good is not to deny suffering. It's not to deny pain. It's not to not set boundaries that are necessary, but instead it's to be able to open to the reality that our perception of whatever is happening in the moment is limited, it's partial, and that really, since everything is an expression of the Holy One, whether that's in more expansive or contracted ways, that there is in everything that unfolds a holy spark. So part of this that Levi Yitzchak is asking for is to be able is for us to open in perception, to be open to how we interpret, receive, open to the things that happen to us, even the difficult things. And the second thing that he says is that not only that, but when you open to life, difficult things, things that might be harsh judgments, as he puts it in some way, you actually have the ability to sweeten it, to transform it into something that is an expression of love or compassion or whatever it is. It's almost as if by instead of relating to the contracted aspect of whatever is going on or the difficult aspect of what's going on and just reacting against it, there's a way of by tuning in to something that is a little bit to the possibility that there is purpose, that there is some goodness, that there is some potential for this to be used or related to in the service of God actually has the ability to kind of change the trajectory of where things are going in your own participation with it. It's almost as if the image that I have is one of, if anybody knows about the martial art Aikido. Aikido is very much about taking whatever kind of force comes at you and kind of redirecting it and moving it to a place of rest. And you find this in other martial arts, whether it's judo or other things, where the combat is not something that is a direct impact confrontation, but instead taking whatever it is and being able to help move somebody else's body, whatever it is, to a place of rest that deflects it. And so in a sense, this kind of perception that he's speaking about is one that is also has that potential. And then he says, this is where we connect to this week's Parsha Vayeshev. He says, this was the type of faith and trust that characterizes Jacob. On the verse, Jacob settled in the land where his father had dwelt, which is the opening of our Parsha. Rashi explains that Jacob wished to dwell in peace. Jacob always sought to accept calmly and with equanimity that all was for the good, even in the land where his father had dwelt. The word is migurei, dwelt, but migurei also has another meaning that has to do with fear or magor. So Rabbi Yitzhak is translating this as Jacob could accept that all was for the good, even when he was surrounded by fear, even when he was in the land that his father had dwelt, but really in a land that was characterized by fear and trepidation, which also is the characteristic of his father Isaac. Isaac, in the Kabbalistic Sfirot, represents judgment, gevurah, strength, and fear, as in fear or awe of God. And so what Jacob was really doing was he was able to take this sense of fear and contraction and boundary and be able to kind of expand beyond it through being able to notice the goodness in it. Okay, so let's take this very lofty and aspirational teaching and bring that into some of our practice this morning. And you know, I think one of the biggest things I'll just note before we kind of give ourselves to the meditation is that this particular teaching challenges our minds, and it also challenges our sense of boundary, because we all know that when and it's very built into our own survival sense as human beings, when we're experiencing something that we become alert on, that we experience as evil or as bad or as threatening or whatever, our mode, rightfully so, is to immediately set boundaries to protect ourselves. And that's really important. And we can't also we need to be able to honor that that experience. But I think what Levi Yitzhak is offering us is a way to be able to go beyond just setting boundaries, but to be able to transform. And in order to transform, we have to be able to notice and see and be open to the goodness and the potential in the situation. So let's take a moment to settle in to your seat, in a position that you can be in for a period of time without moving around too much. You can close your eyes. And the chant that we'll do this morning is just three words, Gam ze letova. This too is for the good. And I invite you also to really sing this with me, even though you're muted, nobody else can hear you, even though you're in your space, either by yourself or maybe there's others that are in the next room. Really encourage you to open to the chant with me, and let the words and the melody help move you into a different place of consciousness. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, 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 gamze letova. Gamze letova, 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 gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, 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 gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova. One more time. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Settle into your body, feeling the pressure of your bottom on the chair, the contact of your feet on the ground, the floor, the length of your legs as they come out of your feet, bending at the knees, coming all the way up to your hips. Notice the distance between the bottom of your spine and the top of your head, the way your arms hang out of your shoulder sockets, and the resting place of your hands. If you can really sense your entire body in space and all of the accompanying sensations, pay attention to the movement of breath as the air enters the nostrils or the mouth, noticing the body gently expand to make room for the inhale, place where the inhale reaches its maximum length, switches over to an exhale, following the air out, noticing the belly or the chest gently contracting with the exhale. And then following that movement of breath back in again, really being aware of how the movement of breath affects the whole body, from the tip of your toes to the top of your head. Making a decision to be present right here and now with the breathing reality of your body, the sounds that surround you, the reality of this moment here. Reflect upon that here and now is the only reality. And that if we want to open to the divine presence and life that infuses every moment, we need to be fully in every moment. And that's a choice. As you're aware of the expansion and contraction of the body with the breath, let your attention be on your heart area. You can almost imagine that you're breathing in and out of your heart, that your heart itself is actually an organ of breath, that the inhale, even as you breathe in to the body, it's also going straight into the heart area and out of the heart area. Almost as if your heart were like an open window, that the breeze just easily moves in and out of that window. Even the image of cool breeze on a summer day moving in and out of the window can evoke a sense of openness and peace. moments where we don't need to defend or protect ourselves, but can really just be at one with the beauty of the day. Bring that same sense of open-heartedness to this movement of breath and body with the inhale and exhale. And from that place of open-heartedness, open to that possibility that every part of our experience in this moment, every sensation in the body, every breath, every thought, every sound, everything that we're aware of in our field of awareness has at its root a divine goodness. An expression and affirmation of life, of giving. That really, when we say that the moment is a gift, we mean that very literally. That every part of this moment is an expression of goodness and gift from the very fabric of the universe. To us in this moment. It is not random. It is not something for our minds to contemplate. It is something for us to open to be willing to receive. I'm going to be quiet for a period of time as we practice. And the practice for this morning again is to first choose to be present with the movement of breath in the body and all the accompanying sensations that go along with our body in space with the breath. Knowing that all of reality is only in this moment. And then second, from the place of our heart and our openness to be willing to receive every aspect that we are aware of in this moment as a gift of goodness. No matter how it presents on the outside. There might be feelings of physical pain or contraction or tension in our bodies that aren't so comfortable. There may be thoughts in our minds that are that have anxiety. But to really, whatever we're experiencing, to be willing to open and receive the gift that is within it. Don't have to figure out what that gift is. Not something to figure out, it's something to open to. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. Gamze letova, gamze letova, gamze letova. So the floor is open for any comments, questions. Gwen, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. You know, several years ago, you and I were talking about evil and that it can't originate from the divine. And this has been probably one of my major struggles religiously throughout my life. And I've never been able to reconcile the whole notion of really what is evil. And raised in the Episcopal Church, you know, they have a very clear separation of those two ideas and how they relate, and sin and resurrection and all those things, which I never was able to believe in either. And so when I was converting, this was an important topic with you. And you gave me probably the very best answer, the only really, even in my mind, plausible answer to that question. And you said something that appears very simple, but it's not simplistic. It's quite profound, which was that evil is really a separation from God, and that it's being out of God's presence. It takes place out of God's presence, or a disconnect from God's presence. And that was deeply satisfying to me, that I could actually find a home for that belief and thought in me. But where it stops, where I still have some bewilderment, is not about, I can make that fit cognitively and philosophically and emotionally and spiritually with the idea of bad deeds or evil deeds. But I have trouble then with people suffering through no action of their own. They get a disease, they're in a war, they're a child, like the shooting at the Christian school yesterday. And I don't know, well, maybe not the shooting. I mean, that would probably fall under a separation from the presence of God, but people suffering and really terrible things happening to them that look evil, feel tragic. What do you do with that? How do you think about that?
Thank you, Gwen. You know, I think there's two, when we're approaching this idea of this really profound teaching of Gamze Latova, you know, this too is for the good, whatever we're encountering. I would say, you know, there's knowledge of the mind and there's knowledge of the heart. What you're really speaking of right now is knowledge of the mind. How do we understand this from, you know, um, what I will say is a consciousness of duality, you know, a consciousness of separation. That is what that is where your question is coming from.
Mhm.
And I'll just for, just to make clear something that you, in reframing kind of our discussion and teachings, is that that when we talk about evil as being um, a sense of separation from God or separation from creation, we're not I'm not talking about like actual separation, meaning that we
That's
are all, it is all
right,
one.
right, but it's a
Right? It's a
perceptual.
perception. Yeah. So I
Mhm,
just want to
mhm,
clarify that
right,
evil is kind of that its root comes from that sense of separation and isolation.
right.
I think what you're also though speaking about is I think that there's something, and it's part of the mystery of the natural world. And if you want to say like, well, why is the world constructed this way? That's not something that we have an answer for in our names, but there is something about the natural world in which death and decay exists, right? And when you talk about kind of the tragedies and the suffering, that whether it comes from illness or that it comes from, tragic storms or all of those things, is that we live in a finite world. The world is constructed in a way that things do not, the physical dimension of life does not last forever. It is constantly changing, um, dying, being reborn, all of that. And that, for all of us who perceive that, whether in ourselves or in people around us, the suffering that comes with all of that is that we want to hold on. We don't want it to change or die because we care about our connections. So I don't think though that all of that um, has to be in conflict with this sense of gamze letova. Now, that's all the level of the knowledge of the mind. Now let's talk about more of the knowledge of the heart, which is this is something in which is not concerned. The knowledge of the heart is not concerned with objective reality. It's not concerned with the metaphysics of reality. It's concerned with how does my interpretation and relationship to what is going on in front of me, how does that affect my actions and my consequences out in the world? What does it mean for me to live in a way and make choices that come towards that gamze letova place? To be able to say, again, right, we're not talking about that I don't set the necessary boundaries that I need to set in order to keep me and others safe. That's a given. But to say with life as it unfolds, that I am going to open to the divine reality, the goodness, the gift that is coming in this moment, even though it may be profoundly uncomfortable. How does that willingness to open to that reality change not only how I approach it, but the choices that I make, how I interact with other people, what I do? What's the effect of that? And that's where the deeper truth comes through. That's where the knowledge of the hearts. Is there really like God's goodness in everything? Can we prove it? Can we? No, we can't prove it. We can't go ahead, but we can see what happens when we live that way.
Mhm, mhm,
See and this is what Levi Yitzhak's teaching was about, was he was saying that it can transform the
mhm,
situation. I actually, if I relate to somebody for whom there is tension with the awareness of seeing and looking for their goodness and reflecting that back to them in my interactions with them, what does that do for the relationship? What does that do for how they feel when they're around me? How does that shift the situation of being willing? How does it shift for me being willing to show up and be present in an uncomfortable situation as opposed to shunning relationship? So this is kind of the knowledge of the heart that I
mhm.
want us to consider. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right. Last chances.
Uh,
Yes, Karen,
I
please.
I've actually known some people who have gone down bad paths, and I feel like it was a choice that were of free will, and that they've been actually given chances for help and not acted on them.
Absolutely. Right? That as kind of Gwen was bringing before, those choices, the sense of what we're calling evil is those choices that come from a sense of separation from life and creation, from feeling disconnected and isolated, feeling like um, you know, I need to act in ways that serve my sense of me and who I am that is not necessarily connected to the people around me. Thank you. Maury and then Sandy.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Kavod. Yeah, sometimes it's a little scary to realize how much control we actually do have over a lot of things. Little control as we have, then there are so many ways that we do have control, that we do make decisions and act on them. And it is kind of scary to think about it. There's all the ways that we're helpless, but then all the ways that we're not.
And what about realizing that we have agency and ability to act and impact? How is that scary?
I don't know. It just is.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, one thing that when we talk about the idea of serving God from yirah or awe, which is also translated as fear, right? It's that sense of really knowing that my actions have consequences, that I'm part of a really interconnected vast whole. And so if I'm going to act and it's going to have consequences, I want those to be good ones. I don't want my actions to cause pain or difficulty or whatever. And so, that is that sense of a little bit of awe or fear that comes along with that. I mean, that's what I hear in that.
Yes.
Thank you. Sandy.
Good morning, everyone. This got me thinking a little bit about my dad, who was agnostic while I was younger and growing up. And then toward the end of his life, had a kind of epiphany about a bigger picture and a faith and belief in something much bigger. And he would talk about how the masses of people would be manipulated by leaders who used faith to calm people away from rebelling. And this sort of all stood that on its head, as he eventually came to too, that having a belief in something that is way beyond what the human mind is capable of doing, like that there's a bigger energy out there that it really is transformative in how you can take the daily things of life, even the very difficult daily things of life, and relate to them. So I never personally really questioned the idea of something that I called God, that was a bigger power, a bigger ideas than I in my own mind could ever come up with. But it is tricky to how to build that in to dealing with the very, very difficult and sometimes sad things that come in life. But I really liked how it was put forth by you today, and gives me more to think about in that whole big jumble.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I mean, I want to really affirm your dad's perspective even before of his kind of awakening in some ways, which is that we all know that the reality is that much of the violence and horror in the world happens in the name of religion, right? And you can have it, you know, you can have some idea of something greater than yourself and use the idea to wrap it up in a package of your own ego. You know, what I can really kind of guarantee is that all of the people who don't respect all of life, you know, in the name of religion or higher power or God or any of those things, are not living this Gamze Letova teaching, right?
Mm.
Able to, because what this teaching, to live this teaching as far as that kind of religious place, is to say that everything in life has something for me to learn from, to open to. It's not a, whereas in the way of using religion from a place of violence is a way of saying, I feel a separation. I see everywhere in the world that's not God, and therefore I am, you know, justified to squelch it out, you know, in some way, or to the threats of God. Where this teaching from Nachum Ish Gamzu from the Talmud, and then Levi Yitzhak bringing it forward, is saying, is coming from that non-dualistic teaching, which is a very, in every religion, is not really lived or practiced in very, it's always a small number of people that live the non-dual reality, whether that's in Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or, you know, or any of these things. But it's that non-dual reality and this openness to goodness and all of divine life that I think really can bring us into deeper relationship with the world, as opposed to, you know, trying to squelch it and cut it off. Okay,
Mhm.
we're gonna have one, sorry, we're coming to our 10 o'clock piece. We'll have one more comment. I'm gonna give it to Michael from Prague here.
Thank you. I just wanted, I wanted to share, when I was young, I used to work with prison population and parole, and mainly like serious sex offenders and like super violent gang members. And there's a lot to be learned from the lifers. You know, the people who spend life in prison maybe without possibility of parole. They have a lot of time to meditate. And, I have a lot of memories, but I remember one from the time I had a lifer, and he was telling me how he spent the first 10 years in a prison, just basically, stabbing people. I'm sure he's killed people in a prison, just really, really dark place. And he said at some point, he didn't find God or anything, but at some point he said, I just thought about it. I just got so tired, and I looked and there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So I wasn't even trying to accomplish any goal, but I just started throwing little pieces of goodness at it and started looking for little pieces of goodness around me.
Mhm.
And nothing changed in a prison, but the world around him changed somehow. Everything became, and he ended up getting parole. So I just wanted to
Wow.
share that story.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Michael, thank you. Okay, before we, first of all, thank you everybody for being here and helping make our beautiful Tuesday morning. Ellen has an announcement.
Yeah, I'll jump over just to the announcement.